Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the upcoming Cfmoto 450Nk. If you've seen any of my other videos, you definitely know by now that anytime you see the NK stickered on one of these motorcycles, it is the naked variant of any of the SS series here in North America, and if you're overseas, those are called the SR series, which are fully fared, more race track-oriented motorcycles. Now, I think it was back in April, they had done the Chinese motorcycle show, and of course Cfmoto was there. They showed off a cruiser and a few other models apparently, but I want to focus on the 450Nk today because it appears that the 450SS has garnered some serious traction and popularity in the world of lightweight, beginner, intermediate motorcycles. So what I'm going to bring you is a bunch of specs that I was able to dig up through mostly Cycle World and having some of my own knowledge about the Cfmoto 450 platform. Before we get going, I would genuinely appreciate if you would like this video and then subscribe to my channel so that way you don't miss the content that's related to Cfmoto whenever I upload in the future, especially if it's a brand that you're interested in. And if you want to learn a little bit more about the brand, you can check out this playlist right up here in this corner where I've done numerous reviews on Cfmoto motorcycles. And even though I try to keep it pretty entertaining, I also try to be very honest and upfront with my reviews so that you can see me as a reputable source who's not just being paid off to shill. Anyway, let's talk about this motorcycle. So while we do have the 450SS that already exists, we can't really compare it because it's from the same manufacturer. So I wanted to compare to a model that has really similar specifications, comes in at a very similar price, and has very similar capability. It should be no secret, this is the Kawasaki Z400. The reason I chose to compare it to the Z400 in this video is because they're both lightweight, naked sport bikes. They both look pretty aggressive. I've ridden the 450SS, the Ninja 400, and the Z400. Now, they're both lightweight, naked sport bike packages, and they're made to deliver a really fun riding experience. And since I got that from the 450SS when I rode it, I imagine the 450Nk will feel very similar. So let's walk through a couple of details that make the Z400 really comparable to the 450Nk. Let's talk about the engine first for both of these motorcycles. Both motors are dual overhead cam, parallel twins with liquid cooling. They do have different crank orientations, so they are going to sound different. And for me, sound is a very big deal. I don't like motorcycles that sound like angry weed eaters. And unfortunately for you Kawasaki fans, that is where the Z400 kind of fits in. It has a flat plane 180 degree oriented crankshaft, which causes it to sound like this. And it doesn't sound much better with an exhaust. But then enter the Cfmoto 450Nk. Again, dual overhead cam, parallel twin, liquid cooled, but it has a little bit of a bump in displacement at 449 cc's, and it gets the sound, baby. Because of its 270 degree crank orientation, this motorcycle essentially mimics the firing order of a V-twin. So a stock Cfmoto 450 sounds like this. But once you get an exhaust on there, it actually ends up sounding beautiful and something like this. But of course, sound isn't everything. We should talk about horsepower and torque outputs to see if the engines really are comparable. And yeah, at 9,500 RPM, the Cfmoto makes peak horsepower around 50, whereas the Z400 makes 49 horsepower at 10,000 RPM. So on the Z400, it actually delivers less horsepower and it delivers it later in the RPM range compared to the Cfmoto. Torque output, this should be no surprise, the Cfmoto is running a larger displacement engine, so it produces 28.8 foot-pounds of torque, where the Z400 produces just an even 28. One thing that's really impressive is the curb weight for both of these machines is speculated to be nearly identical. On the fully fared models, the Ninja 400 and the 450SS from Cfmoto, they're within like 5 to 10 pounds of each other. So really close and pretty cool to see Cfmoto focusing on getting that number dialed in to be as competitive as possible. Taking a look at the seat height, the Cfmoto appears that it's going to be taller, but not by much. It seems to be taller by only about 0.1 inches. And you'll see my sources on here, by the way. I'm pulling all of that stuff from Cfmoto just on the 450SS side. But since it's the same frame, motor, transmission, wheels, tires, all that stuff, you could basically assume the seat height is going to be identical. I don't think seat height could be a make or break decision for you on either of these motorcycles. What it's going to come down to between these two is probably seating position and whether or not it favors a more forward bias where you're kind of bent over, your weight's on your wrist, or whether or not you're going to be more upright and kind of just moseying along all pleasant like. Now the brakes. The 450SS did receive a set of Brembo brakes, but I don't think the NK is going to get that. It's just not as performance-oriented and not trying to be a track bike. It's an around-town machine. But we can use a subsidiary of Brembo, aka Z400, to supply the brakes instead, and we'll still have very good stopping power with a large 320mm disc up front with a twin-piston caliper, compared to Kawasaki's 296mm disc using a Nissan setup. Nothing wrong with the Nissan brakes, it just is a smaller disc, so in theory it won't stop you as quickly. The rear brakes on both of them, these don't really matter. They're single disc 220mm with a single piston caliper. It's the same for both machines. They have the same stopping force essentially. But that can be influenced by a couple variables like quality of components, material of brake pads, type of master cylinder used. So while the rear brake isn't the most important, there are a couple factors that can play into it that can either benefit or inhibit your ability to stop efficiently. And your front suspension on both of these motorcycles is going to be a 41mm fork. No adjustability or variability between the forks, but there are things in your forks that can drastically change the way that they behave, like materials used, spring rates, fork oil weight. There's a lot of variables that go into this. You can't just look at it on paper and say, oh, this bike is better. You actually do have to go ride them and compare them in the real world to see which one feels better. Rear suspension on both motorcycles, I'm fairly certain, is the exact same. They just call them different things. Cfmoto says that they use a multi-link rear suspension, and Kawasaki says that they use a unitrack rear suspension. The only adjustability on the suspension on both of these motorcycles is the preload collar out back, which, if I'm thinking correctly, and correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, you can just set your sag, right? So whenever you get on the bike, it's going to sag a certain amount. If you adjust that preload collar to be on a stiffer setting, you won't get as much sag in the rear end. But your ride quality will suffer because it will be a stiffer preload. But again, if I'm wrong, let me know. Comment below. The instrumentation, Cfmoto always kills it on these TFT full color displays. And from what I understand, they do have Bluetooth available where you can get turn-by-turn navigation, you can get all sorts of data points on your bike, you can even geofence and track your motorcycle as well. I think there are a couple bugs in the app, but it's not the smoothest working thing, but it is cool to know that you do have that stuff and you can kind of see what's going on with your machine, which does create some transparency from rider to product, which will make you feel better about the bike and like you guys actually have a relationship, even though it's an inanimate object. And then on the Z400, you just get, that basic analog LCD gauge. It gives you the basic info that you need, and with a bike of this caliber, you don't need a ton of readouts or a bunch of data. But with the Cfmoto, it is really cool to have that stuff. Again, though, not necessary. It is really interesting, though, that Cfmoto can put that nice of a display into this bike, but Kawasaki, who has been making motorcycles for a very long time, can only give you an analog LCD. They make great products. I'm not saying they don't. Bottom line, both displays do their job. They give you the stuff that you need to see. The Cfmoto just gives you a little bit more in terms of what it can do and all that fancy stuff. Finally, these two are neck and neck with miles per gallon. I estimate between 50 and 60 miles per gallon for the 450Nk, and the Z400 also between 50 and 60 miles per gallon. Last thing that we can talk about is the pricing on both of these machines. So since we haven't officially seen the release of the 450Nk here in the United States, I'm going to look at the Ninja 400 compared to the 450SS. And they're about $200 apart in starting MSRP, so that's where we'll put the 450Nk compared to the Z400. $200 apart, with the 450Nk being the more favorable option in terms of price. $5,199 plus whatever standard dealer fees are associated with that with your local dealer. And then the Z400, $5,399, same way, fees, surcharges, stuff like that. I've ridden the Z400. They're a ton of fun. You can really push those bikes to your limit, and the bike will not outride you. which makes them really fun to have around town or in a twisted road because you can really push it. It's a great learning tool, but I think that for Cfmoto to come out with a very competitive machine with a lot of similar specs and some that are even better, that's going to give Kawasaki a reason to make their machine better. So I hope in the future we see a version of the Z400 that pushes the envelope a little bit more and makes them innovate, because that's what competition does. Competition drives innovation, which drives industry. And I think that's pretty cool. I don't have anything else to add, but I'm super curious to know what you guys think of the possibly upcoming 450Nk. We don't have any confirmations for it yet for 2023, but I could really foresee this bike coming over to the States whenever Cfmoto launches their 2024 lineup. And hopefully during that 2024 release, they announce that the 800Nk will be coming over. Eventually, in the future, there will be a link right here that you guys can click to go watch that video as well, covering the 800Nk, specs, and comparable models. But for now, that will go ahead and wrap up this video. Again, please let me know what you guys think. Drop a comment below with your thoughts, questions, and opinions about the upcoming 450Nk. I feel really confident that we'll have this bike over here in the States within a year. That's all I've got. I don't have anything else to add. I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you have a wonderful week, and please, ride safe.